Bruce Allen Burrell was convicted of a second murder in September 2007 by a jury who got it right the first time. For the first time in American history, Burrell had been found guilty of not one, but two murders, the corpses of which had yet to be discovered. Burrell has been a suspect in both women's disappearances for 10 years. Aside from the fact that both of his victims were rich women, they may have been from other worlds. They only had one thing in common in life: they both knew Bruce Burrell. In death, however, they are quite likely to be much closer, with their bodies maybe buried in the same grave or hidden forever in one of Burrell's many bottomless mineshafts on his southern New South Wales Highlands farm. Mrs. Kerry Whelan, 39, the mother of three and wife of Bernard Whelan, a successful Sydney businessman and CEO of Crown Forklifts, went to a hairdresser appointment in Parramatta and vanished, signalling the start of Burrell's demise. Mrs. Whelan's car was seen on surveillance camera leaving the parking park a few seconds after she left. It was a distinctive two-tone Mitsubishi Pajero with a bull bar. A ransom note was delivered to Mr. Whelan's office shortly after, demanding $1 million in US dollars or his wife would die. The ransom message stipulated that an advertisement be posted in Sydney's Daily Telegraph when the money was ready, which would be anytime in the next 7 days. Anyone who saw a white Volkswagen Beetle parked beside the eastern gates of the Sydney Olympic Complex at 10:30 p.m. on Tuesday the 8th of April 97, please phone, said the advertisement. Then, at the bottom of the advertising, include your home phone number. A full cup of tea, the Whelan family nanny came forward and told police of an unusual circumstance that had occurred just a month earlier when a former sales employee of Mr. Whelan, Bruce Burrell, had arrived unannounced at the Whelans' rural home during the day and had secret Mrs. Whelan's motives for interacting with Burrell remained a mystery. "Can you do me a favor?" Mrs. Whelan asked the nanny after Burrell had left. "You've never seen him around here. Keep it a secret. Give me a few weeks and I'll explain why. Don't be concerned. I'm not having a relationship." Kerry Whelan had never been unfaithful to her husband, least of all with a lowlife like Bruce Burrell, who had been fired by her wife years earlier because he couldn't be trusted. It has since been proven as conclusively as possible by police and author Candice Sutton that this was definitely the case. Police raided Burrell's farm in the Southern Highlands and discovered a Mitsubishi Pajero that was identical to the one in the surveillance video, a typewriter that could have typed the ransom note, 2 handwritten cryptic lists that could have been the outline of a kidnap plan, empty bottles containing traces of chloroform, and a map book that highlighted the car park where Mrs. Whelan parked her car. Hundreds of cops descended on Burrell's farm in search of Mrs. Whelan, but all they discovered were several stolen cars and firearms. They learned that Burrell was unemployed and broke, and that he couldn't keep up with his farm's mortgage payments after additional examination. Burrell was not considered a suspect in a comparable instance that occurred 2 years prior until police began investigating Mrs. Whelan's disappearance. On the 30th of May 1995, between 1 p.m. and 1:30 p.m., 74-year-old grandmother Dorothy Davis left her home in Sydney's exclusive Lurleen Bay and told a builder she was going to see a cancer-stricken friend down the street. Since then, she has not been seen. Mrs. Davis' sick friend was Bruce Burrell's wife, who lived close and had known Mrs. Davis for many years. Mrs. Davis' sick companion was not present when she arrived at the flat, according to police. Bruce Burrell, on the other hand, was waiting alone to murder her. Burrell took a sudden and unplanned trip to his farm near Goulburn that afternoon, returning the same night before repeating the 5-hour round trip the next day. Burrell was eventually found to have murdered Mrs. Davis at his apartment, leaving her body at the farm on the first journey and concealing it on the second. But why did Burrell assassinate the old woman? What was he hoping to achieve? In 1994, it appeared that Bruce Burrell approached Mrs. Davis, a wealthy widow who had been given a large sum of money by her late husband, and discreetly borrowed $100,000 to buy a unit on the street. When Mrs. Davis continued to demand the remainder, Burrell confided in a friend that she had gone so far as to threaten that she would take legal action to get the money back. Burrell allegedly went to soothe her in order to persuade her to stop threatening her. Mrs. Davis vanished not long after. Burrell had never been suspected before, until Mrs. Whelan went missing. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Burrell, authorities sorely needed him to make a mistake in order to prosecute him with Kerry Whelan's murder. On the morning of May 23, 1997, it happened. As police turned his house inside out and the media camped outside, Burrell drove to Goulburn, where he made a call from the phone box outside the Empire Hotel, ostensibly believing that calls from public phone boxes were untraceable. Crown Equipment got a call at 9:21 a.m., the same time Burrell was in the phone booth. A man approached a receptionist and requested that she copy down this message and deliver it to Mr. Whelan. "Mrs. Whelan is well," he said. "Today, Mr. Whelan must bring the police and the media to a halt. Tell him I'm the man in the white Volkswagen," I said as I hung up the phone. The white Volkswagen reference was only known by the abductor, the police, and the Whelan family. The call came from a phone box outside the Empire Hotel at exactly 9:21 a.m. According to phone traces, Burrell admitted to making a call from the phone booth, but claimed it was to his lawyers. That was quickly debunked. They had their man, but without a victim, establishing the case would be nearly impossible. Burrell was charged with 6 charges of stealing cars discovered on his property, including the Pajero, in the meanwhile. He pleaded guilty on October 22 in the Parramatta District Court and was sentenced to 2.5 years in jail. Police now had him under their control, allowing them to keep an eye on him and have free rein over his property. Bruce Burrell was accused with the kidnapping and murder of Kerry Whelan on March 31, 1999, but the charges were later dropped due to a lack of evidence. Kerry Whelan was kidnapped and murdered in 2002, and a coronial inquest determined that a known person was guilty, and the case was sent to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Burrell was tried for kidnap and murder in the NSW Supreme Court in August 2005, but the jury could not reach a unanimous decision after nearly 2 weeks of discussion. Burrell was retried in March 2006, and after 9 days of deliberation, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release on June 6, 2006. Burrell was charged with the kidnapping and murder of Mrs. Dorothy Davis, and under the rules of subjugation, no mention of his earlier conviction for a very identical crime could be made during the trial or in the press. However, it appears that it was unnecessary. All of the evidence pointed to a clear case of an elderly lady being murdered for personal gain. Burrell was also found guilty of the kidnapping and murder of Mrs. Dorothy Davis in September 2007, and was sentenced to another 28 years in prison. We can only speculate if the specifics of the Kerry Whelan murder, which was one of Australia's most spectacular and well-publicised trials, influenced the jury's decision to convict Bruce Burrell of murdering Dorothy Davis and concealing her body. But, after all, who really cares? Do you think so? The odds of a similar set of circumstances ever occurring to an innocent guy are in the trillions. We can